Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, and it literally is Christmas. I am recording this today on December 25th to go live tomorrow morning, and I know some people are like, do you really record a podcast on Christmas? Yes, I do. You know, I feel a certain connection with what I proverbially refer to as our listening family. Those would be people who never miss an episode, and so there's certain kinetic energy and connection. So Christmas is family time, and I'm happy to deliver a podcast with you today. Now, even I wouldn't want to be in the podcast booth all day, but a few hours on Christmas, happy to do it to make sure that the information that we share with you is the most current, up-to-date, and fresh. And it's a little bit of a non-traditional Christmas in our family. We often will get together with my mom, used to be my dad. Of course, he passed over the summer. But both of my daughters are in Grenada. Yes, Grenada on the beach, and everybody's dealing with this storm. And we're looking at photos of them being tanned. So Kara's best friend from Davidson, originally from, I always forget, sorry, New Yorkers. It's either Queens or Brooklyn, one of those two. They met at Davidson, but her family lineage is Grenadian. So that's where they like to go. And all three of them are extremely close. So they're there from the 22nd through the 29th. Speaking of Joy, some good news for her. Not only her birthday, I want to shout out for her birthday, but she just accepted a job at Duke University in student affairs. So if you've got a student at Duke, stop by student affairs and say hi to Joy. She starts in January. You know, God has a sense of humor. I'm this Big Ten fan when it comes to football. Then Joy goes to Georgia, and now all of a sudden I have to pull for Georgia. And our regular listeners know Norm and I grew up referring to Duke as Puke. And now 3 players from Westtown go to Duke. And now Joy's working there. So now I'm finding myself trying to pull for the Dukies. It's going to be challenging. All right, today we have 5 updates in higher ed. All of them involve money. And all of them involve the topic of paying for college. So that wasn't intentional. I just took a look at what I thought the big news issues were of the week. And then when I started going over all my notes, I realized, snap, all 5 of these are financial. All 5 of these have to do with paying for college. And there was going to be a 6th. I was going to talk about this $500 increase in the Pell Grant. But because Susan and I just recorded an episode where we talked about it there, I didn't even go there. All right, so what are the 5? Well, 2 of them involve closures. Yes, closures. So citing the headwinds and enrollment woes, we have another school, and I have to be completely transparent with you. I've never heard of this school, so I don't know every single school out there. There's too many. Cazenovia College in central New York State announced December 7th that it will be closing. And it's really sad, too, because it was just coming up for the brink of its 200th anniversary. But you know your school's in trouble if you're coming up for your 200th and you can't raise money off of that. You know, I started in Westtown in 2001, but I actually started volunteering with them right at the end of 99, 2000, right on that cusp. And Westtown was founded in 1799. So all the 200th anniversary stuff was going on. And money was just pouring in droves. And then my first year, actually, I was the director of annual giving, so I was in a fundraising role. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but the point is, when you come up for your bicentennial, that's the time when donors dig in their pockets and they give. And so if that was not enough to rescue the school, then, you know, it was probably a smart decision. And interestingly enough, they joined a small group of other institutions that have announced closures this year, including Lincoln, which we've mentioned, and Marymount California University. So, COVID, of course, took its toll on the school. But listen, a lot of times people will ask, how can we know if a school's financially in trouble? There's a few ways, and I'm going to mention them sort of a little bit today. Not all of them, but some of them. But one of the ones you want to look for absolute sure, is enrollment declining. So take a look at enrollment numbers over the last few years. And in the case of Case Novia, snap, it was bad. So they peaked at 1,000 students, and then they dropped by more than 40%. And current enrollment of 746. So pretty much every school in the country is tuition-driven to some extent. Oftentimes we refer to Princeton as the wealthiest school in the country when you look at endowment per student and just all of the resources. Last I checked, and this is quite a few years ago, so this number could be a little bit off, but 40% of Princeton's operating budget was being generated by their endowment, which is just a staggering figure. But that still means 60% is coming in through tuition and things like, facility rentals and stuff like that, which is a small part of that budget. It's overwhelmingly going to be tuition. So even a place like Princeton is bringing in more money from tuition. So a lot of these schools are literally have no endowments, and they're literally 99% tuition driven, other than the little amount they can earn for things like using their facilities for rental over the summer and a few other ancillary ways, but they're not significant. Obviously, contributions from donors, being another big one. So there you go. Casnovia defaulted actually on a $25 million bond payment in September. And that's another sign, by the way, that you could look for if you're trying to find out is a school in trouble. If you read anything at all about any defaults on any bonds or anything like that, run in the opposite direction. It's danger, danger, danger. And I'll have, another thing to look for in a second. All right, my second big announcement today. Birmingham Southern College needs $37.5 million in government money to stay open. I actually did not realize that they were experiencing this level of financial woes, but it's pretty bad. And once again, you'll see the same signs. Drop of enrollment, inept funding, and one other thing I want to mention. So they had a 1,000 persons. So this is what you see with the pattern with these private schools: shrinking enrollment, low endowment, defaults on bonds, and then the third thing that you'll often see is reduced credit rating. Another thing you can look at is the Moody's credit rating. So in order to borrow money, which schools need to do, Moody's assesses them all according to the risk, just like you and I get a credit score. Moody gives these schools a credit score, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why they are rankings conscious, because that's a factor that Moody's looks at, is your position in the rankings and some of the data in the rankings. But anyway, that's going off on another tangent. But they are saying that they need $37.5 million in government money just to be a stopgap. And so far, they've already had $45 million come in through private donations. They say they need $200 million by May of 2026, just to, for one, give a bit of endowment as a cushion so you're not completely tuition driven. Just keep in mind, these private schools are not getting the level of state funding that you're seeing from the public schools. So anyway, keep an eye on that. So here's a few more things. Birmingham Southern is asking Alabama, the state, for $12.5 million. So even though they don't get the state money, the same way the state schools do, there has been a way that they have been able to get some significant money, and that's through the American Rescue Plan Act that Congress passed last year. That is applied to both public and private schools. That is partly what kept Cheney University afloat. So there's some schools that literally have been saved by this American Rescue Plan Act because it was not only for public schools. So they're looking for $12.5 million there. They're looking for $17.5 million from Alabama's Education Trust Fund, which typically pays for public education in the state. So we'll see what happens there. And it's requesting $5 million from the city of Birmingham and another $2.5 million from Jefferson County. So And basically they say that without that level of state support, the college will close, and they will be informing high school seniors, check this out, by mid-January, yes, that's right, 3 weeks, that they won't accept applications. So this is a decision that's going to be made in the next couple of weeks. And when you look at Birmingham Southern's financial woes, they've actually been mounting for some time. A lot of the blame, according to leaders, has to do with an aggressive building program they did in the mid-2000s. See, this is the quandary that colleges face. You know, you'll do surveys. Why did you choose not to come here? I used to be over all of our surveys, which I loved, by the way, in admissions. So we would do a refusal survey to find out why people, we admit it, didn't come. That was always interesting. An attrition survey, why people are leaving that are in your school. And then we did what we called a DNCP survey. DNCP, boy, I'm giving away an admissions vernacular on a Monday, wasting one. So that stands for did not complete the process, DNCP. For people that got halfway through, and why did you not finish the app? Did a DNCP survey. And then you did a survey, of your current enrolled students to find out why they picked you over the competitors and what other schools were you admitted at. So I was over all that. It's something I really loved. So you'll do surveys, and the survey will come back and say, people don't like your dorms. People don't like your food. People think that, your student center's no place to go. And, and so you engage in this big building campaign, or your athletics needs an upgrade. That's very, very expensive, but it's risky because in the case of Birmingham Southern, they spent all this money in the mid-2000s. They have not got the return on their investment. Of course, the Great Recession, 2007 to 9, really hit them hard. They found several errors in their accounting, which is not good. And then what I mentioned to you before, Moody Investor Service, one of the major credit rating agencies, in January just downgraded their bonds. So that's going to make it even more expensive to borrow money. And keep in mind, with these interest rates going up, borrowing money is more expensive now. So this is just a very, very challenging time. Dave and I are going to be talking about this coming up in the not too distant future, but really challenging financially, for schools right now. Okay, enough about that. Let's switch to the third topic. We mentioned this a while ago as an idea, but now it has started. California has begun the service program for college students. This is an ingenious idea. Keep an eye on it. I think it's going to be mimicked, and I got to give Governor Newsom from California a lot of credit. This is his brainchild. And, probably staffer came up with it, but he's the face of the program. So let's talk about how it works. So students get $10,000. Now think about it. Pell's going up to $7,400. Some schools have state grant money. You really start to make college affordable for under-resourced with an extra $10,000. They get $10,000 from the state to pay for tuition and living expenses. But instead of just handing them the money, or instead of saying, go get a job as an Uber driver or DoorDash or whatever, you got to do 450 hours of community service. So that's the exchange. You do your 450 hours of community service, and you get $10,000. Well, it's pretty good. It's $22 an hour. So you're getting paid well to do community service, and it goes into your college or your tuition fund. So the California College Corps is a state program. It just began this year. Selects certain low-income college students. They get selected to get this $10,000, and it has to go for tuition and living expenses. Here's a quote. Instead of working at a restaurant or a cafe, now you're going to have a chance to tutor, to mentor, to take climate action on, to go to food banks, to do other important work, says California Chief Officer Josh Friday. We really think this is an exciting and unique model, and it's a model we hope gets emulated by other states around the country. So they want this to stimulate other states to follow suit. Shout out to California for being a leader. The 4-year program is funded by $300 million in state money, and it's going to help 13,000 students enrolled from now all the way through 2026. And it's really interesting how they went about picking the students. So They partnered with 46 California campuses, and it was a range of schools. There was UC Berkeley in there. There was Cal Poly SLO. But then you had places like Fresno City College. They all sort of got together and they identified which students they felt could benefit from this the most. The inaugural class has 3,200 people. And, of course, there'll be 4 classes similar to that, so 13,000 people over 4 years. Of course, I've already mentioned the students will do the 450 hours of service hours. Now, you may remember our regular listeners, there's a lot of research out there that shows that students that work up to 15 hours a week actually have higher GPAs than those who don't work at all. I was having a conversation with a UC professor this week and about this topic, and she brought the exact point up. She said, absolutely, because some structure is great for kids. And that's true. And I actually experienced that myself. I worked all through undergrad, about 27 hours actually, but I was doing a job where could study while I was working. So maybe you could count that 27. You could cut it in a third, how much, and I don't think I've ever shared this before, but I was a night receptionist. I've always been a night person. So from 11:30 to 7:30, when someone came into the dorm, I was the person they had to show their ID to, and I'd let them in the dorm. The great thing about that job is you study the whole time. Once an hour, you have to do walk rounds around the dorm just to check and make sure, there's no funny stuff going on and all doors are locked and there's a little bit of a security thing. So 15 to 20 minutes, let's say 15 minutes you walk, 5 minutes you're checking people in and looking at their student IDs, and the other 40 minutes you study. So cut my 27 hours in half and say, and effectually, probably I worked about 8 to 10. I just got paid more. But anyway, it's not about me. The point is, research shows that some studying is good. When I got to grad school, I didn't work, and I actually noticed I was not as disciplined. So this program is designed to help low-income students, and others are building community gardens. They're planting trees. They're working at food banks. They're participating in local community service projects. The point is the colleges identify what the needs are for them, and the kids are assigned, but it's all productive stuff. And when you look at the incoming class, just to get a sense of the demographics, so it's mostly comprised of first-generation college students and more than 80% students of color. So that's a good feel-good story. All right, 2 more stories today, and as I told you, they all have to do with money. The last 2 are on the same topic. Update on these strikes. What's going on with these strikes? So this strike, good news, December 11th, it actually ended. And adjunct professors will get a significant pay increase. So, but before I talk about these 2 strikes, look for others to follow suit. Both of these were very successful. In fact, the CUNY system is already making it very clear that they're studying kind of what went down here. So let's talk a little bit about the new school. So the new school had a 3-week grueling strike, grueling over pay and benefits for part-time faculty. Well, you say, well, it's only part-time faculty. What's the big deal? Part-time faculty are 90% of the faculty. They rely heavily on adjuncts. So this is incredibly disruptive. Walkout. Classes ended up having to be canceled because nearly 90% of the faculty are untenured adjuncts and lecturers. Furthermore, the school is facing a lawsuit from irate parents. There's so many things to like about New School and Parsons, that whole complex, but it's really expensive, pushing $80,000. How'd you feel you're pushing almost $80,000 and classes are canceled? Irate parents who had threatened that they would withhold payment or force their child to transfer if this wasn't resolved almost immediately. They also called for Dwight McBride, the president, to resign. Now, the instructors had argued that they had been getting meager increases in their salaries, despite inflation and the strain of the pandemic. They also said that a disproportionate amount of the university expenses is going to the salaries of administrators, even though enrollment has been rising in recent years. But all the pay is going to the top. Now, one thing about this strike and UC Berkeley, the UC strike, they both used UAW as their union to represent the faculty in negotiations. And union members said that their compensation is still not going to be on par those at comparable institutions in the city, but for the most part, all their demands had been met, including health insurance. Here's a quote. They said the new contract would see pay rates by 13% in the first year for the best paid adjuncts. So an adjunct was paid $5,753 for a 3-credit course. That had been the ceiling. Now, I know some place where you get $1,500. It's the adjuncts make peanuts, but New York City is so expensive. So the ceiling is going up. Now it's going to go to $6,520 for a 3-credit course. And for those of you who don't know, adjuncts they teach courses, but they're not on full-time staff getting all the benefits. So, they can be doing anything. They can be in retirement and come out and teach a course. They could have a business as an entrepreneur and teach a course. Now, by the 5th year, the adjuncts are going to get $78.20, a 36% raise. And there's some adjuncts at some parts, such as the conservatory, that are getting a 31% raise in the first year. So they really won. So this is the challenge and the dilemma. You've got faculty that are upset. They're not getting paid a living wage. But then if it's not in the budget, how does the school make it work? It's really, really, really a debacle. In a statement, the new school wrote that the agreement is strong, fair, 5-year contract that increases compensation significantly, protects health care benefits, ensures part-time faculty are paid for additional work done outside the class to support students. The private school in Greenwich Village had argued it did not have here's the point. The private school in Greenwich Village had argued it did not have enough financial leeway to accommodate these demands. It said, we do not have a large endowment. We rely heavily on tuition. So how are we going to do it? Tuition's total, like I said, pushing almost 80% with a 7% increase the year before. So, and then, new school, I won't get into it, but it's a very kind of interesting place, really creative. Founded in 1919 as the New School for Social Research, an avant-garde institution. It was aimed at sort of countering the traditionalism of the Ivy League. And the school had an American pragmatism built at its core with, one of its founders was John Dewey, the progressive educator. And for years, it's been a leader in influencing, educating refugees to New York City and returnees from the war. And they do some super creative things. Now, here's the last point I want to make, and this is what I said. Watch out nationally what's going on. Listen to this. Adjuncts at the City University of New York, CUNY, are closely watching how negotiations pan out ahead of their own contract negotiations. All right, so there you go. And then the last announcement, another feel-good story. I've talked about this twice, but I have an update. And before I do, I will tell you, I was having a conversation with I referenced a professor in the University of California system. 2 professors, actually, husband and wife, both are professors. And I won't mention which UC because I never asked them if I could share this. But, and I was talking to the wife and I said, where's your husband? And she said, oh, he's in there grading papers. Like this strike, he doesn't have all the help he used to have. He's got to get in there and do all this stuff. This is really tough. Well, the good news is it's over. The University of California academic workers strike reached a settlement on December 23rd. Raises will range from 55 to 80% through a combination of a number of things that will provide standardization across all the campuses, raising minimum salaries and extra bump for workers in higher cost areas. Now, it's still not a lot of money. When you see the money, you can see why they felt they needed to strike. The agreements are going to raise the minimum starting salaries to $35,000 for graduate and student researchers, $34,000 for TAs, and that's not until October 2024. The wage floor for TAs will rise to $36,500 at Berkeley, UCLA, and San Francisco. In other words, there's accommodations for higher cost areas. They get an extra $2,500 at minimum in there. The agreement also enhances the benefits for employees with children. It adds new protections for paid leaves, and the vote among the academic student employees was 11,386 yes, 7,097 no. And for graduate researchers, 10,057 to 4640 said no, so it passed. Now, opponents of the contract argued the wage increases were still not enough to cover the living costs at the most expensive cities, and they balked at the fact that there's a 2-year ramp-up period. But the UA negotiators proposed doubling some salaries at the start of the strike and later reduced the proposal. And I already mentioned about 12,000 postdoctoral students and academic researchers returned to work on December 7th. That part was settled, and they got a minimum pay of $70,000, among the highest in the nation.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
So those are our updates for the week. Quite a few. Hopefully you enjoyed them. It's now time for our interview. Part 2, Gus Resendiz, as we continue to talk about pros and cons. So we continue to talk about what are the pitfalls in athletic recruiting and how to avoid them. Listen and enjoy. So, I've said this before on the podcast, but I love my daughter to death. We're super, super close. She calls me besties. The other day she says to me, "Hey, Dad, want to get a tattoo together?" She almost gave me a heart attack because I'm old school. That'd be so cool. Anyway, we're really close, but she was so difficult for me because I personally did not think she was a Division I player.
Yes.
I thought she could be Division II or Division III. But you know what? She was hearing that from her AAU coaches. She also had a personal private trainer who felt she's Division I, and even her own high school coach, who played at a high level in the SEC at Vanderbilt, felt like she could be Division I. So it was really hard for me when she would push it back in my face. It's really bad, Dad, when my own father doesn't believe in me, and the AAU coach and the trainer and the high school coach think I'm Division I, and you don't. So it really led to a lot of tension for us.
And that highlights that the process needs to be really transparent at home, right? And mom and dad and aspiring athlete, student athlete, right, need to be on the same page about what they want for the experience. And we can talk about kind of admissions tips and all of that stuff. And look, like we were all in on this, right? Nick ended up dropping football, but now he's thinking about what opportunities are out there for, co-op type of stuff, for summer internships, for a semester abroad, all of the things and some other clubs. And he'll pick up, intramural basketball just to kind of, be on something competitive. But the opportunity set, the time put into the sport, wasn't really translating. It's not high school, folks, anymore. And the opportunity for your kid to be the star of the team, look, Nick played safety, would have multiple interceptions in a game. He'd play quarterback, run for some, throw for some, even catch one. He'd return kicks and punts. I think he scored every which way you could score in a high school career. And it was a ton of fun for us to watch that. But once you get to college, and all of a sudden, he is not the fastest kid on the field. He is not the strongest kid on the field. He's not one of the bigger kids on the field. He would say things to me, and they moved him from quarterback to wide receiver. And some schools thought he would be better suited at safety, and he wanted to be a wide receiver. And so he gave it a shot. But he would say things to me like, "Hey, I had this ball, it was coming, I was touchdown coming, and the safety came out of nowhere. I've never had someone close on me like that before."
I remember walking into gyms, and I know you can relate to this because you have a couple of basketball players, and your kids have some height, but I've never seen girls that tall.
Oh, we have girls that are 6'5" in our house all the time. All her friends from AAU. We have, so for it's not just getting in, right? It's what does that experience look like? So I talked a little bit about Nick's experience with football, and he was happy. He did it. Some of his best friends at school are on the football team, and it's all good. He's having a nice experience over there, and we're thrilled for him. Katie has just started. And the other thing, you'd mentioned injuries. Nick retires. We're particularly happy because he does it relatively healthy, right? A couple of high ankle sprains, a bad hamstring for a semester. But, it's football. So we'll take it, right? Like we're relieved that was it. And Katie tore her ACL at the end of the very last game of her senior year in high school, and she's still recovering, and she's not cleared to play yet. And that's tough for the kid. She's put so much work into it. Danny's had a couple of injuries along the way as well, and it's a big sacrifice. It's a big sacrifice on your body. And while you can have a traditional high school student experience playing a sport at a relatively high level in high school, when you get to college, you're sacrificing a lot of other things with it. And as long as the risk reward, as long as the athletic and academic and affordability match is there and it all works out, then that's great. And my daughter Katie went to Groton School here in New England, and she also went to prep school. And her college counselor said to me at one point, and this is why I know that your podcast is just amazing, because everything they were telling me I already knew from listening to you guys.
Thank you, Gus.
But what he said to me is, like, at the end, Katie had a few really great opportunities across the UAA. I always want to say AAU, the UAA, the NESCAC, and then the Claremont schools. And what he said to me at the end was, we're really happy with this result because she's going. And by the way, it's the same at affordability issue as it would be at an Ivy, because none of those schools are giving scholarships for sports. And so at the end of the day, his advice or his conclusion to us, or observation, was she's got the right academic athletic match.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what we're going for here. Right. I mean, there may be a kid that really wants to go to Michigan, but the basketball or football coach is not returning his calls. Right.
And I'm really glad you talked about that. For those of you who don't know, Groton is really one of the most high-powered college prep schools in the country. In fact, when I did boarding school admissions and placement, I'm convinced Groton and Phillips Exeter are the two most academically rigorous schools. So Katie's coming from a very, very high-powered high school from a standpoint of academic rigor that routinely places kids at the most selective schools in the country. And Claremont McKenna is one of the hardest places to get in. So she was able to leverage her athletic talent to get into a really high-end academic environment in my favorite consortium in the country. And so she really, was able to have a successful experience. I relate to the injury. My daughter broke her leg on the basketball court between junior and senior year, and a really bad break. And I'm so glad, because I was sitting out there, was at a camp at Berry College in Rome, Georgia. The coach was all over her to try to get her to come. And I decided, I want to go open a new bank account. They've sent me this $300 thing. If I open a new account, I'll go around the corner and open a new account and make it a savings account. And I missed the whole thing. I got a phone call, but, rushed her to the hospital, and she's just excruciating pain, screaming. Boy, it's really hard to see your baby just in that level of pain. And that really disrupted her. She was first team All-Region freshman, sophomore, junior year, but not second team senior year because she had the leg break. And then a lot of schools backed off when that happened. And, one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people targeting the wrong level.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. There's so much, just like in the regular college admission process, there's this fixation on schools like Ivies and Ivy peers, and a lot of people just trying to get into that one school that's a little bit harder to get into than maybe their kids eligible for. That happens in basketball, that D1 or bust mindset. People feel like they have to go to the most competitive place they can possibly get in. And a lot of times people that do that, they don't get any offers and they could have maybe played somewhere else if they would have targeted the right level.
Or they go to junior college to try to leverage it, or they do something that sometimes people don't know when enough is enough around some of this, right? By all means, go pursue it. And if it works out for you, great. But if you're not having the match, academically, affordability. Well, if it's D1, I guess the proposition is you'll have the full scholarship.
Well, but that's
again,
only for
not
some
if you're a
sports.
hockey,
Remember,
right?
That's
Not hockey, not
lots of
baseball,
sports. Lots of sports are just a few thousand here and there.
So I'll mention my crew experience at Northeastern. So I played sports in high school, but no college coach was interested in me by any stretch of the imagination. The high school coaches were barely interested in me when I was in high school playing sports, right? But I was reasonably athletic and tall, and long arms and legs and whatnot. And the crew coaches found me on campus, kind of the first week of school. And so I started working out with them, and I realized that being on the water on the Charles in October is really not that fun. As a side note, I did end up.
Your Boston roots only go so far.
Right, that's right. I did end up in law school in Southern California. So
I noticed that, and I see where Katie's at school.
That's right, Joey. She's texting me the forecast, a screenshot of the 5-day forecast in Claremont, and the message is, "How did Mom ever talk you into coming back to the Boston area?" I said, well,
I think you've lost her to sunny California.
That's it. Yes, we knew at the minute that they offered her. But so when I was out there, when I was at Northeastern, I went up to the coaches and I said, how does the scholarship opportunities work? And I was a naive kid, and again, last century, right? And there's no Google to look this up, right? And so I just asked the question, and they looked at me kind of, with just disbelief, and said, "Well, there's no scholarships here for this."
Right.
And I said, "But we're D1, right?" It's like, "Yes, but we're a Title IX offset sport." Right. And so what that means is that there's very few places where you get scholarship money for crew is my general understanding, right? I may be wrong on that one.
No, there's not that many crew there's not that many schools that have crew.
Right.
And most of the schools that have them, if you look at the crew rankings, eight of the Ivy League schools are on the top 10 nationally in the crew rankings. And it's a lot of schools like that and your higher D3 schools. Those are the schools that typically have crew. So crew is not a scholarship sport. Crew is maybe you can leverage it to get into a highly, really strong academic school. Although I do find for crew, the standards are high academically. I mean, I've seen some really strong students not get offered crew spots because they couldn't get through the academic pre-read.
So on the admission side, right? So I'll talk about a little bit of the process here for Nick and Katie, and hopefully it's useful to the audience. We focused on getting the SAT done as soon as possible, right? And save a couple of bucks on that last tournament, skip it, and put that money to work with the SAT tutor.
Let me stop there and say why that's such a good idea. Like, a lot of times, even in this still test optional world, when it comes to athletic recruiting in higher end schools, they're immediately going to want to see the transcript, and there's a strong preference for test scores still, even in this test optional world when it comes to athletes. So when they're initially just doing that quick, I call it like when you go to the doctor, it's quick blood pressure pulse check. It's a transcript review, which of course is grades, grade patterns, and courses taken, and it's test scores. And it's a lot like fly-in programs are the same thing, and so posting a high score with a good transcript will at least initially allow a coach to say, okay, I think I can get you through the pre-read if you're going for academic schools. Because those, no coach wants to waste their time. And if you're at the Tufts and all those NESCAC schools or, Patriot League, all these different leagues, immediately, they're bringing in true student athletes. And so if you can't get through the academic review, you're not even going to get to first base.
Right. 100%. And how do you know the coaches are serious? Because these conversations get very specific, right? And at some point, your kid should be driving the relationship and the communication with the coach. And you should be encouraging them to start developing the kind of a real relationship where you're having some back and forth. And, we were learning as we went with Nick, and he probably would have benefited him to start even a little earlier. We thought we were on time. We were already a little late in that process. And what that might look like is, your sophomore year, you're reaching out to these coaches, sending a short email, bullet points, right? Take the time to be brief, as the expression goes, right? The tagline might be, wide receiver, GPA, SAT score, height, weight, 40 time. That's your subject line.
Yeah, you said a number of things there I want to hit, and I don't want people to miss. One is the student should be driving the process. That's extremely important because a lot of times parents, especially if you're more controlling type or just maybe you run a business, whatever, parents want to get in there and start doing more than the colleges want the parent to do. Like there's going to be parent communication, of course, because there's going to be, I'm not trying to say there's none, but they really want to know that the student is the one who's interested, not the parent who's more interested than the student. And because they know that the parent's not going to be there, the student's going to be there, that's the relationship they're really most interested in cultivating. And so that's a really important point that you brought up. And then the other thing was that immediate communication. And I thought Paul McGinley brought up some really good points in the Trinity interview when he said that first outreach to the coach, I can see right through a form letter immediately. He said it about 4 times, make it personal. There should be some personal thing where I can tell, he's been there for 31 years, as an experienced coach, you can tell if a kid is just sort of shopping their wares to 50 schools with a general form letter versus if they put a little time in to have a little customization in the body of that outreach.
Right. 100%. And with respect to the parent communication or parent participation in that process, I would say review the video with your kid. Maybe help them with the tech. Although if you're like us, they in our house they're better
Sure.
than we are with the tech.
Sure.
Suggest that they don't have the music in the video. Right. Suggest that, hey, we've seen you hit a bunch of 3-pointers here and finish here, but I didn't see mid range. I didn't see you find the open man. I didn't
or
see
show
the
some
defensive
defense.
stop.
Some defense in the video.
Exactly.
Everybody just wants to show making all their shots, and a lot of coaches want to see that defense. Yeah.
Right. And so, have that. Communicate with your AAU coach, with your high school coach, and make sure you say, I'm sending this to these 10 schools, right? I'm going to put your name and number down. Right. And this is the form email. This is the video I'm sending. Do you have any comments? Pull those folks into that process. If you're lucky, and look, we live outside of Boston, Mark, you're outside of Atlanta. We had a very rich set of options with respect to the club teams.
Sure.
Right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so the benefit of all of that for us is that we found coaches that were really knew the process. Right. My daughter played for MCW and Michael Carter Williams basketball program, and his mom literally runs the program. To say that she's connected is an understatement.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And when she calls, people will pick up the phone. Right. And when push came to shove in the recruiting process, and we said, hey, will you reach out to these schools? Man, these folks were all over it. Danny's got a great high school coach, has been around for years, just won some statewide award for his career. He's a terrific guy and builds great culture, but he knows the coaches, and that helps tremendously. But if you have to pull these folks into your process with you, and the really great thing about this process from my perspective and being, in the professional world is that it's building their processes around networking and building relationships and building interviewing techniques. And, it's almost a sales job. Right. And, you guys talked about some of these big platforms that, you have thousands of kids and you sign up and you get these resources. One of the resources that we really like is a product out there, and I can say the name or not, but
go ahead.
It's out there. It's called Sports Recruits, and it honestly, both of our AAU teams for Katie and then for Danny had this, but it's like a sales force for it. And so Justin and Paul are great, talk about, no form emails and all of that. And so you can type in a school and it populates the whole coaching staff into the email. It saves you hours.
Yeah, we used NCSA actually for Joy, and it does the same thing. The technology is amazing.
Right. And it houses everything, your transcripts, right?
Yes.
All of that stuff. And
Yep.
it's on your phone when a coach communicates with you. It's the school you've been waiting to hear from. You can reply to them within 15 minutes because you have to show interest, right? You have to show interest.
This is so important.
And
what you're saying.
They get hundreds and hundreds, thousands of emails. And, so I said, get that SAT score in early. Make sure your GPA is as good as you can have it, because ultimately you're going to be a student. And, look, if you're looking at a D2 school, it's going to help you. The better your SAT score, the better your GPA, the earlier you have that stuff locked down, the more merit money you're going to get, right, on that stacking.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things you've said I want to highlight. One, going back when you talked about the athletic process starts sooner than the regular college admission process for non-athletes.
Yes.
And the higher end you're going, or the higher division, the earlier it starts. And so I like to see, athletes. I think athletes need to be looking at stuff in 10th grade. They don't have to if they're really good enough. They can start. Justin and Paul said you could start fall of 11th, but they even said for the more competitive sports, you might want to be reaching out in 10th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important. It's good picking the team that your club team or whatever is really important, as you've mentioned.
The one really important item around that is that some teams really only care about their D1 placements.
Yeah.
And if you have to understand where you are, and how committed the organization that you're with is to finding the right home for each kid.
That's really important, because the thing is, these schools do build their brand off of, look at the kids that I've got into ACC, SEC, Big Ten, or even other league, could be Northeast. I mean, Division I is what a lot of parents want to hear. It's what a lot of kids want to hear. And so, that always troubled me. And all the, multiple teams that Joy was at, they would always be bragging on their top end kids. That's how they recruit. That's how they recruit players. And that's what parents and kids want to hear, that, wow, this person was at that program. And look, now they're playing for XYZ school. And so that's a pretty common thing, that what you just said, that they care about their Division I recruits. So you need to be at a program that cares about more than that. The other thing that's really important is you as an athlete, you've got to build a great relationship with your AAU or your club sport and your high school coach. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants a knucklehead. These coaches want to recruit someone that's got good work ethic and good attitude and is going to be able to get along with the players on the team and the coaches. And so, if you're really, really talented, but you're very difficult to work with, that's not going to bode well for you, because these coaches get fired if they don't win. So expect them to have conversations with other coaches that you've played for to learn about you.
Right. And when you get to college, and this is more true than it is in high school, if you're 5%, if someone's 5% better than you, they're going to get 95% of the time.
That's a good point.
Right. And so you have to ensure that your kid understands that when I get to the next level, the chances are, right, I'm not going to be the big star. And when you put that video together, it better have some defense. It better show you finding the open cutter, right? To keep it at the basketball, right, example. And you've got to ensure that you are putting together the kind of resume and you're carrying yourself in a way that the coach can conclude that you are going to be a team player, that you're going to do whatever is asked of you for the success of the team at the next level. Because if you go through and you do 4 years of college, it could be that, and now they're bringing, at all levels, 50-year seniors are coming in because they all have the extra year. people are transferring down. And I know at least at D1, I'd have to check for the other divisions. If you transfer, you're immediately eligible.
Yeah.
So
D1.
there are less scholarships that are being handed out to freshmen because they're holding them back for the transfers.
I once talked to a D2 coach that said, man, our phone just blows up with D1 kids that transfer. In fact, one of the schools Joy was looking at for a while, I'm glad she didn't end up going there, University of Tampa in Tampa, Florida, because she looked at the Sunshine State Conference, which at the time was either the number 1 or number 2 Division II conference in the country. And the whole roster is Division I transfers. And the coach basically said, I keep a bunch of spots because I know that I not only can I can get this Division I person who thought they were all that in a bag of chips, and they went and got humbled because they rode the pine and didn't play that much. Now they're coachable and teachable. They're also a little bit older. Look at I was looking at the age of the players on these rosters. They're like 21 through 24.
Oh, especially the hockey players.
Yeah, they're getting, and so that's a common thing. Another thing is you kind of need to know the rules for all of yours, but the recruiting process for each sport can be a little different. And Paul and Justin touched on that. You have your time sports, right? Where, I mean, it's really the easiest thing to me to work with when I'm working with somebody in a time sport because you either have the time or don't, especially sports like swimming and track and field. And crew can be that way a lot too because they want to know your 2K time. And then you have your team sports, and they talked a lot about that. You go to your ID camps. But there's a lot of sports that have showcases.
Yeah.
And you got to know like what showcase to go to. A lot of times like lacrosse, baseball, sports like that, you go to the right showcase and all the coaches come there to see you and getting to those, and so you kind of need to know the little bit of the rules for each of the sports. Gus, one thing I'd love for you to talk about is having a coach be all over you and say they're interested in you is not the same as actually having an offer. I'm sure you've experienced over-promising on the part of coaches, and then the kid thinks that they're getting in, and sometimes it's because they're recruiting over you at the same time, and then they end up getting somebody else, and then they drop you like a hot potato. But sometimes there are unscrupulous coaches out there, or not really just unscrupulous, but sometimes I think they think with their heart. And they want kids so badly, but they haven't fully aligned their thinking with the admission process. And even in the NESCAC conference, there's some schools that have bad reputations for coaches over-promising, and then they can't get the kid through the pre-read.
Right. There are, you have to force yourself to listen very carefully to what they're saying. And if you're talking directly to the admissions people or the financial aid people, whatever it might be, you have to listen very carefully, right? And really parse out what they're saying and what they're not saying in it. When Nick started going through the process, there were a number of D1 schools that were sending him, sending him messages on Twitter, replying to his emails, texting him. And I kind of deduced that from the activity levels and what he would show me, it was like they're keeping you warm in case they get to you on the list.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We can see how that goes, but let's focus on D2 and D3 for you. And if D1 materializes, then terrific. And some schools, and I do want to give credit to some schools were really great in that they looked at his transcript. The coaches would say, send us everything. And by the way, it was all on his, cloud drive on his phone. So when they emailed him and we were on the road to a camp, he would be replying before we were out of the car. Here's the transcript. Here's the writing sample. Here's this, here's that. And one coach in the Patriot League very honestly said to us, you need to put 100 points on your SAT for us to be able to send you to take you to admissions.
Yeah.
Right. And you would play here. You would play here, but it's going to need some work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
it's always great when those coaches will be honest with you like that.
Right.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but then there were coaches that would, and this is for all of the kids, right? there were coaches that would reach out and really be very enthusiastic, and then you wouldn't hear anything again from them.
Yeah.
Like, send us everything. Okay, great. Looks great. Send me your schedule when you're on the road, and, where are you going to be? We're going to be in Louisville. We're going to be in, so-and-so. We're going to be in St. Louis. And then it just drops. Right. And that's where having your good, your good relationships with your AAU coach and your high school coaches, you say, hey, I stopped hearing for this person. Can you check in? And I remember one time, Katie's coach came back and said, yeah, they've moved on. It's like super, like we already got the gist, right? And that was a really great D1 opportunity, but we were a little disappointed. Like, you come in so hot and heavy, and then you just stop replying. Like, at least have the courtesy that we're asking of our kids in this process.
Friends, this concludes the second part of what is a 3-part interview. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Thursday's episode, Dave's in the saddle, and we're talking about the college essay. An article from Stephen Marche of The Atlantic entitled, "The College Essay is Dead." Thanks to you, several of you sent that in for us to discuss. Our question from a listener, part 2 of questions that 2 listeners sent in, one from Eric of Iowa and another anonymously, asking very specific questions about working with a private college coach. In our interview, it'll be part 3 of 3 with Wendy Beckemeyer of Cornell College, and the topic, Understanding Cornell College. And friends, I close you as we get ready to almost transition into a new year with something that's the bottom of every single one of my emails. And those of you who've emailed me know this. And I want to read it to you. And it simply says this: your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. See you on Thursday, everybody. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel, and to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.